I don't know if this is the correct sub to post this, but I just remembered this from last night and wanted to get it off my chest. I was just chilling in my room playing some games late at night. I was playing with my headphones on, but I heard a faint sound, like someone walking around outside. So I take off my headphones and slowly open the curtains, and I didn't see anything. I assumed it was maybe a raccoon, since there were many of them where I live. I went back to my game, and not even a minute later, I hear the sound again. I didn't bother to look up because I thought it was an animal or something. I kept playing my video game, and eventually, I noticed that the crunching sound had been going on for definitely more than a few minutes. I felt confused and scared. I was afraid to look outside. I thought maybe it was someone that was scouting my house to break in. I was scared shitless and felt sick. The sounds outside were still going on as I mustered the courage to look through the curtains. I slowly opened them some more and the sound stopped. When I looked out into the road that was in front of my house, there was a fucking terrifying creature. It was at least 9 feet tall. It was grotesque and inhuman looking. I still feel sick and scared writing this. I don't know if I was hallucinating, but I fucking hope I was. Me and 2 of my friends were driving to a skate park down a long main road with tons of cars and huge views of vast fields and farmlands that you can see pretty far on either side of the road. I'm sitting in the back. My friend, riding shotgun, didn't see anything, but he's blind as a bat and is generally unobservant anyway, so he missed what we saw, so I won't be mentioning him further, but he was there. The driver was my friend visiting from serving in the Navy. It was his first time home since high school pretty much. This dude isn't into the paranormal or anything conspiracy related. He's what you would call a stick in the mud when it comes to conspiracies. A sort of government brainwashed army soldier type who doesn't have time for nonsense. He takes no shit and will physically be angered by me or my friends joking around about aliens, 9/11, or any type of conspiracy. He'll tell you that nothing exists except for us and the earth, yada yada. Well, he did, until this day. So we're driving down this road, and I'm staring out into the field, and I see a man in the middle of it. He completely catches my eye, since the fields are so empty and plowed this time of year. He's just chilling in the field, staring out into the sky, maybe 150 yards off the road. So far enough that you can't make out distinct features, but close enough that you know there's a 6-foot tall dude in a red flannel jacket. Pure old school hunter, Clark Griswold looking burly man. I never took my eyes off of him, and I looked at him for maybe a long second or two as we drove past, but in the seconds as we came parallel to him and then past him, there was no longer a man. There was a deer. A straight up deer, normal as shit. There was no transformation. It didn't drop half size and become a deer. It just was a man, and then it wasn't. In the blink of an eye. I can't explain it any further. It just changed instantly like a film effect. I sat there for a second, pondering what I just saw. I almost didn't want to say anything, as the token stoner of the group. I figured they'd laugh at me, and my Navy friend would get mad, and tell me I was stupid. But I noticed the car was in a weird silence at that moment, so I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna break the awkward silence. I said, dude, I swear, I just saw the weirdest thing a second ago. And my Navy friend, dead straight face, said, was it a guy standing out in the field in all red that randomly turned into a deer? I literally dropped my jaw to the floor and said, you saw that shit too? And he said, Yeah, I wasn't even going to say anything because it seemed so ridiculous, but when you mentioned something weird, I knew you must have saw it too. We talked plenty about how it was a tall ass guy in a red flannel jacket, and how it wasn't a transformation, it was almost like a pure switch in thin air. We don't get to talk much since he's serving in Greece, but he tells his bunk buddies the story all the time, and not many believe him. I'm still a misfit and carry the story to tons of skate parks and parties and hangouts, and no one ever believes me until I say, well, this guy was there and he saw it too, and they instantly stop laughing and say, oh shit, he saw it too? Because we all know that he has no fun or imagination when it comes to these things, and everyone knows he's the more realistic and grounded one of us. So the fact that we saw the same thing at the same time still blows my mind, and it was one of the craziest experiences of my life. When I ask if he believes there's more to the world, he still says no. Even after that experience, he says there's an explanation, but the red flannel jacket just makes the whole thing so irreversible. We clearly saw a strange phenomenon. This took place in Maryland, about 30 minutes from Baltimore, so not much area folklore, and definitely no skinwalker stories. There were Native American settlements, but no more than your average place. So, 10 or so years ago, I was driving with my brother in Virginia Beach, Virginia. It was late at night, and we were going to grab some food. We were the only car on the road, which wasn't abnormal due to the time of night. The right side of the road was very wooded, and on the left was a fence that ran parallel to the road. Suddenly, this humongous, wolf-like creature ran full speed in front of the car. It came from the right wooded area and was booking it toward the fence. This thing was at least 12 feet tall minimum. It was hunched over, running insanely fast on its back legs. The legs were bent backwards and extremely muscular. They were furless, except for near the bottom, where there were patches of fur. It was wearing a brown, hooded cloak that was tattered along the bottom edges. The hood covered its head and midsection, leaving the legs fully exposed. An elongated snout was emerging from the front of the hood. It was square like a wolf's, and it was covered in fur. It never even acknowledged us. It was running toward the fence, and it jumped and cleared it easily. I have never seen anything jump so high. I spent the next couple of minutes trying to process what I saw. I thought there was some kind of logical explanation, until my brother said, "Yo, did you see that?" and described in detail exactly what I had seen. The only thing that differed was that he saw what he described as long claws emerging from the front of the cloak. Seeing this thing terrified me. 10 years later, I'm still terrified to think about it. Any ideas of what it was? Edit. The cloak and the backwards legs were something I really focused on. The cloak was cloth, and I am certain it wasn't fur or anything else. My husband seems to think what I described is a wendigo, which I'm not sure the description matches. It didn't have any antlers, and from what I looked at, those things live way up north. He did mention that they were Algonquian-speaking people, a Chesapeake tribe, living in Virginia Beach many years ago. So I don't know what made me think of this today, but many years ago, my family was driving home from a shopping trip. Just for fun, my dad decided to take one of the scenic routes that ran through the mountains north of Park City, Utah. It was one of those dirt roads on which you could only drive like 20 miles an hour, so it took forever, and I remember being aggravated that we couldn't just take the highway. Well, I ended up noticing this weird heap off the side of the road, kind of hidden amongst the trees. I made my dad reverse the car, and that's when we realized it was some kind of animal. It was lying on its side, as if asleep, and wore one of those cattle tracking collars around its neck. But we could tell that it wasn't a cow of any sort. And because it was facing away from us, we couldn't get a good look at its face. But it was about the size of a bear and had thick brown fur. The skull didn't really look like a bear's though. The closest thing I can compare it to is the heads of the creatures from where the wild things are. It was curled up in a ball, the way people sometimes do when they're sleeping and trying to get warm. And we could see the soles of its feet. This is the really creepy part. Because if it wasn't for the feet, we probably just would have assumed it was a bear. But these weren't paws. They were more human-like, much paler than the fur, and totally creepy. I could basically make out distinctive human toes, only these were much larger than the average person's. The way it was curled up, and the way that the head and feet looked, led us to believe that this wasn't some ordinary animal. Obviously, with it lying down, I couldn't tell for sure, but it didn't look to be that much taller than a person. It was just so round. I think that's one of the things that struck me most. The thing's body was almost comically spherical. Needless to say, none of us dared to get out of the car to investigate further. And after a moment of kind of looking at each other and going, "What the hell?" we decided to just move on. Keep in mind, this took place circa 2006 or 2007, so smartphones weren't as commonplace as they are now, and none of us had a good camera to snap a photo. Looking back, I really wish we did, because then maybe we could have uploaded it to the internet and gotten some answers. I don't know. What do you guys think? I never thought I'd share this event with anyone, at the risk of sounding illogical, but I thought this may be the best platform to do it. I acknowledge that I was quite young when this occurred, so I will only share what I remember. But I know what I saw. I'm 28. As a child, I was in the same multi-grade classroom for grades 1 through 3, so I had the same teacher for those 3 years. Every year, on March 1st, my teacher would explain that each day until St. Patrick's Day, her mischievous friend, Patty the Leprechaun, would visit our classroom to cause mayhem and play innocent tricks on my classmates and I. Some examples would include coming into the classroom in the morning and our shoes would be tied together at the laces, or we'd return from recess or music and the classroom would be a mess, accompanied by a note from Patty on the whiteboard. In the back of my mind, I wondered if it was our teacher doing this, but it was still delightfully fun, and I look forward to this every year nonetheless. My perception of these events changed one day in the 2nd or 3rd grade, somewhere between March 1st and 17th. We were in class when suddenly the lights turned off and the computer shut down. Naturally, I turned around to see if someone had flicked the lights off, but no one was standing at the switch, not even near it. The next thing I remember is someone knocking at our classroom door. A student opened it, but there was no one there, and reportedly no one in the hall. Our class was giddy with excitement, as we wondered if Patty was responsible for this. I acknowledge these events are fairly explainable, but alongside the classroom door, there was a window that was as tall as the door, but only about a foot wide. I was gazing at this window, curious to see if the mysterious knocker would return. I was just feet away from the door. Suddenly, I saw a small green man flash across the window. The best way I can describe it is a small, hazy side profile of a small man, about a foot tall, with a brown beard and a green suit. He was in a stance as though he was running, although he was frozen in that position as he flashed across the window. In a split second, it was gone. The figure looked apparition-like and didn't appear to have the tangibility of a physical object. It didn't look like a piece of paper being pulled across the window. I realize that it's totally possible that another staff at the school was in on it and somehow did this. I've pondered the possible ways that this could have been accomplished, and I can't seem to come up with an explanation. And I know I didn't just imagine it, because a moment after I saw it, another girl in my class exclaimed, "I just saw something run past the window." 20 plus years later, I know what I saw, but I still don't understand it. I'm left wondering, were my little 7-year-old eyes deceived by a simple trick? Or did my elementary school teacher have some Miss Frizzle-esque magic about her and somehow summon a magical creature to mystify us? So, it's about 10 a.m. at the time of writing this. I couldn't sleep at all last night. I live in a small town of a few hundred people in the middle of nowhere in northern India. It's surrounded by a huge forest on the western side and farmlands on the other 3. My house is positioned on the southeastern corner of the village. So, last night at around 2 a.m., I was awakened by this blood-curdling scream coming out of the east. I think it was loud enough to wake our entire village, though I haven't talked to anyone about it yet. This scream sounded like nothing I'd ever heard, like a mix between a scream and a howl. Mind you, there are no animals in our area except for some stray dogs and a few wild boars. This scream was loud enough to give me goosebumps. I quickly turned off all of my lights and looked out of the window which faces the south. And that's when I saw it. About 100 meters away from me. It looked like a canine-like creature running on 2 legs. Its fur looked silvery white under the moonlight. It was running at very high speeds and crossed from where I saw it into the forest in about 30 seconds. But in the middle of its journey, when it was closest to my home, it stopped for a few seconds and looked in my direction. I'm still not sure if it was looking at me or something else. One thing that I've been thinking about is how slowly its legs moved, yet how fast it ran. This could only mean that this creature was very big, at least 10 feet tall. I'm terrified right now, as my village has this saying that we should never look outside of our windows at night, as evil spirits might see us and come into our lives. Edit. I asked around my neighborhood, and many people were woken by that scream. An older guy told me that the creature is a Rakshasa, which is some kind of demon. I've only been here 6 months, and several people told me hearing screams is a regular occurrence here, and the Rakshasa will haunt whoever it lays its eyes on. I'm scared as fuck right now. I'm going to install CCTV cameras around my entire house. This happened about 7 years ago, when I was 16. This story requires a bit of backstory, so bear with me for a sec. My dad's side of the family lives in deep southeast Texas. I'm talking like 100 people to a town deep. That being said, My cousin lives down there. My cousin grew up learning every single inch of the woods. Every sound, every smell. You get the point. He could hear an animal moving way off in the distance and tell you what it is without any hesitation. I want to preface this by saying I don't know what exactly this thing was, but the closest I could come up with must have been either a Wendigo or a skinwalker. Alright, so the night of the encounter, me, my cousin, and my best friend all head into the woods. You know, dumb 16-year-old shit. We all had shotguns, as we like to raccoon hunt, or just shoot at random shit for fun. If you've ever been in a pine forest, you know that there's pretty much no lighting from the moon when it gets dark, so we brought headlamps to be able to see where we were going. Eventually, we come up on a high bank on a creek, probably about a 15-foot drop or so, I'd say. You could almost say we were on a peninsula. The water flowed around the spot we were at in a U-shape. We decided to sit down, turn off our headlamps, and look up at the trees to see if we could see any stars. After sitting silently in the dark for about 15 minutes, my friend goes to turn on his headlamp. My cousin grabs his arm and whispers to the both of us, "There's something about 20 yards to our right, and it's moving toward us." I've never been more terrified in my life as when I listened and heard heavy bipedal footsteps making its way to us steadily. This thing wasn't searching, it was beelining. At this point, we all just freeze in place and listen. It reaches the bank on the other side of the peninsula, and without skipping a beat, starts descending. We hear it enter the water, and eventually come to the other side of the creek, the side that we were on. It starts scaling the drop-off, effortlessly. This thing kept the same pace, whether it was level, descending, in the water, or climbing. It's now only about 30 feet or so away at this point. My cousin whispers, "On the count of 3, turn on our headlamps and shoot." The footsteps kept getting closer. They were heavy, heavier than any animal that would be in those woods. On the count of 3, we turn on our headlamps, and nothing. No sound of something scurrying away. No footsteps. Nothing. We hightailed it out, with one person guarding the rear. And what do you guys think? I'm convinced I almost had a deadly encounter. Am I crazy?